Hi, I'm Roy Jean,
I'm Marc.
and this is Clazz in the Woods, our very first episode. And today we are joined by one of Marc's students, Kimmy. Hi, Kimmy.
Hi,
How you doing today, Kimmy?
yeah, I raised my rooster because now I'm here.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time.
We appreciate you, sir. Sure.
So today we're talking about Chinese accents. And so to start, we can just talk about what inspired what questions came to mind afterward.
Okay, I can share my opinion. I
Yeah.
saw the video many times. Yeah, and I think I don't want really know what a southern accent sounds like, but I
Uh-huh.
think the accent are shaped by a confluence of cultural
Mm-hmm.
environment and technology factor. Like in
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan, there are different accent between the northern and the southern factor,
Right,
southern
Yeah.
region.
right.
Yeah. So one thing is interesting is some people move to China and speak with accent that are different from those in Taiwan. It
Right.
feels like we are from different world now. So
Uh-huh.
what I don't quite understand is how someone can change the way they speak just by moving to a different place. Since
Right.
our accent are from by the environment we grow up in. Yeah, that
Sure,
is
Yeah.
sure.
my opinion.
Okay.
That's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things that we figured out in discussing this is that accents they don't really translate super well into Chinese. Like,
Mm.
there's dialectical differences between different regions of China, but
Mm-hmm.
those dialectical differences are much bigger
Yeah.
than they are between the different regions of the United States. It doesn't matter where you're from in the US. If you speak American English, all forms of American English are interchangeable with each other. We can understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now they sound different. The way that we'll make the vowel sounds is different. But the only real information that communicates is where you're from.
Yeah. I think in this case it's a little different because in the U.S., if you speak English, you might speak with a different accent, right? And in China, um, like different people in different regions, they speak different languages or
Mm-hmm.
different dialect, like
Mm-hmm.
Sichuanese or Shanghainese. And so, if they grow up speaking that language and then they learn to speak Mandarin, which is the lingua franca there, the
Mm-hmm.
language that everybody, well, the language that they use to communicate mostly. Um, Now they're gonna speak with their accent,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not because of it's a little different from like say Southern accent. I
Yeah.
guess like it's they didn't grow up to speak. They didn't grow up speaking Mandarin, but they learned it because of So the accent kind of came from their first language. So in
Mm-hmm.
that case, it's a little different, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but Kimmy, would you say that people in Kaohsiung, when they speak Mandarin, do they have an accent? Because you're from Kaohsiung.
I think the Mandarin in Kaohsiung similar like Taiwanese,
Yeah.
Mm. Okay.
Okay.
or a little bit different in Taipei's Mandarin.
It's Mandarin, which makes sense because there's a larger Taiwanese population, Taiwanese speaking population in Kaohsiung and Tainan, or the South in general. So their Mandarin has an accent
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Do you know, I feel like maybe, this is just a thought I just had, that like, because the like accents in English are possibly particular to English because in English vowel sounds are not super important. I mean, they are important, but they're not super important. Like, for example, I say bag. A friend of mine says bag. Both of those are correct. Where we're from. She's from somewhere up north. I forget where. Like close to Canada. The closer to Canada you get, their vowel sounds are different. Now, if I were to say bag, like I need a bag for my groceries at the grocery store in my hometown, they would look at me kind of confused for a moment, particularly if they've not met anyone from that place and they're not used to that vowel pattern.
Right. So vowels are A, E, I, O, U.
Right.
A, these vowels.
Those sounds in English aren't super important, but contrast that with Korean, because I used to live in Korea for a while, and in Korea what I learned is that you got to get the vowel sounds right.
Oh.
The consonants are less important, whether it's g or k or b or p. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, but you have to get the vowel sounds right. So in Korean, like in South Korea, their version of an accent is not quite so much how they pronounce consonants. It's in the north of Korea, not North Korea, but in the northern part of South Korea, like close to Seoul, the way they pronounce Korean is very flat. It's monotone.
Yeah.
The further south you go, like closer to Japan, you'll start to hear like a wavy intonation in how they speak, so that it sounds a little bit more like Japanese. So maybe like every language has its version of like, well, in our language, this particular facet is not as important for meaning.
Yeah.
So it becomes associated with, because it's not super rigid, you don't have to get the vowel sounds exactly right.
Right.
Well, then you can have some variation there that can then over time develop into, oh, I know where you're from because you say the word bag.
We should do an example of, because Kimmy, we should do an example of Southern accent. So if like, you know, like the CNN accent, it's what is it called? Radio.
Oh, like
the broadcast.
There is it's like broadcast English. It's when you watch CNN or the news or something, and the way they speak, they train those people to sound like they're from Nebraska or like the central part of the U.S. because that particular part of the U.S. people think of it as like, oh, their English is like very standard there. They don't have like weird pronunciation or anything. It will be easy for everyone to understand.
Right.
Kind of like BBC English. Like what you hear on the BBC is a version of RP, the upper class British pronunciation.
Yeah. So if I say bag, how would you say the same word in with a Southern accent?
In Southern accented English, it's common to split diphthongs. So instead of saying I, which is two vowels together, ah, e, right?
Yeah.
We'll drag it out.
Yeah.
I. Rather than blending them together, I. Or in the video, I like the example she uses with the word dress. I say dress. Very simple vowel sound. Okay. Now in Georgia, she's using the Georgia accent. And I think a detail that maybe gets lost is that there's not just one Southern accent. Like there's Louisiana, and even within Louisiana, there's Louisiana and then there's New Orleans. Alabama, Mississippi has its own accent. I can think of specific examples like the Mississippi accent. Talk. No, that's New York. Talk. I love the way you talk. They won't say the L. They'll make it sound like T-O-C-K. Talk.
Can you hear the difference?
Very subtle.
Talk and
talk. I love the way, but then even then, it's that vowel. It's tricky to get the vowels to right. It sounds like it's
a vowel
from there. But in Georgia, she uses the example of dress, which they will split into, how do they like 3 different vowel sounds, like A, E, I, S, dryas.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, it's just stretched out. And the more isolated a language community is, they will stretch out the vowels longer and longer and longer, and they will de-emphasize the consonants.
Yeah.
Have you seen the TV show Tiger King?
Oh, which one TV show?
It's called Tiger King. It's a documentary on Netflix.
No.
Well, I don't know if you like documentaries or not. It's a documentary about a very strange man who is from where I'm from, not far from here, about 50 miles away.
Yeah.
But he raised tigers, and it gets crazy. But in any case, if you watch like just 1 or 2 episodes, get to the part where it's him talking. The Tiger King is the one talking. He speaks with a very, very, very thick Oklahoma accent. It's so thick that in the documentary they have subtitles under when he speaks. There's subtitles, and you can't turn them off because they assume that like you're not going to understand this guy anyway. So like,
yeah, that's something that because I want to respond to what Kimmy said earlier, which is that how come, and Kimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, but you say something like, how come the more people move, the less accent becomes. Right?
Yeah.
Like, the more people. So, because in the video they say like, like younger Americans, they move to a big city. If they're from the South, they move to a big city, they interact with other people, and then they slowly lose their accent. Or they had just sort of reached this, they either pick up a new accent, or their accent just becomes more leveled, or
like, I mean, really, it's in. They will whatever their unique vowel pattern is, they'll kind of like clip it down to what is absolutely necessary. Like what sounds do I need to make so that you understand me, as opposed to I want to sound like the people around me so I feel like I'm part of the in-group. I mean, that's part of what maintains an accent.
Yeah, because accent is never just an accent. It's like it tells you where you're from, and if that place that you're from has, if people think of it as like, people have all sorts of stereotypes and ideas and thoughts about different places. So your accent is always gonna be about where you come from, your background, your education, your a lot of things. So I think that like Kimmy, for example, when you moved to Taipei, did you have lived in Taipei for a few years, right? You have lived in Taipei for
Actually, I was born in Taipei.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you changed the way you speak over the years, or like drop something or adopt something, so that you could sound more like. People say that people from Taipei have an accent. I don't know. I'm from here, but I don't know what the accent is, but apparently there is. So have you changed your way of speaking? Have you changed the way you speak so that you could like fit in better?
I'm not sure, but I think I use my original accent to speak. But sometimes I listen from another one, but another people from Kaohsiung or Tainan. Their accent is a little bit different.
A little bit different. Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah, similar
Taiwanese. You have
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Marc was gonna say that I've dropped my accent, which, like, I think It's about half true. You know, I had a thought that it's not a direct answer to your question, but maybe it'll make a little more sense, I guess. Like, why do accents disappear? But then that also implies, well, where do they come from in the first place?
Yeah.
Do you happen to know offhand the most linguistically diverse region on Earth?
A New York City?
Well,
Are we talking about like
I'm talking about like
country or
like New York is diverse because it's an economic hub.
Yeah.
Like it attracts a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about a place that is just linguistically diverse, but not for economic reasons.
I actually don't know. Europe?
The Caucasus. You know where that is?
Oh, the Caucasus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
No, you probably want to. So the Caucasus is the area between, oh gosh, Turkey and Russia.
There's like the Black Sea. Do you happen to know where the Black Sea is?
Black Sea?
It's
Black Sea.
So like Russia and Ukraine have been in a war for a couple of years now. That war is taking place close to the Black Sea. If you go a little bit to the west from the Black Sea, there's another sea called the Caspian Sea. Between those two seas is a mountain range called the Caucasus. It's the most linguistically diverse region on Earth. It's one of. It may not be the, but it's one of. And it has to do with the geography of that area. The Caucasus, they're not particularly tall mountains, but they're very difficult to get through. They have lots of isolated valleys where like to get from one valley to the next is quite difficult. In that kind of situation, you have these small communities of language speakers who stayed isolated from each other for hundreds of years, and their languages diverged to the point where they're not intelligible with each other anymore. The more isolated a community of language speakers becomes, the more over time their pronunciation will become more unique, more idiosyncratic. It will diverge from the larger side. So the opposite of that is that the more people mix and intermingle, the more standardized and flat the communication style will become, because you're having to communicate with more people.
Yeah. Kind of. Yeah. The flatter. I guess the flatter the accent is, the easier it is to guess what you're trying to say.
Or just, the less time that you spend on extra unnecessary sounds that just slow you down or make it difficult for another person who isn't used to your vowel pattern, whatever that happens to be. Like vowel pattern. I say dog. Someone from New York says dog. And maybe you don't hear a difference there, but I can hear a difference, just very subtle.
Yeah.
Now, that's not enough to make it difficult for me to understand them, but like, for example, someone who's from Northern Ireland who speaks English, I have a really hard time understanding them because their vowel pattern is so unique, and they de-emphasize the consonants too.
Right.
So I have nothing to anchor myself. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of vowels.
Drowning in the sea of vowels.
Yes, a little bit.
There is a really interesting question which I've been thinking about quite a while, and it's related to what you're saying, which is that, like vowel, when we talk about the American, I'm just gonna call it standard American English, right? The vowels are, like that, and then versus, you have New York accent, Boston accent, a Southern accent, and then sometimes the vowels in these accents can be quite, like, you can still kind of see a little bit of those vowels from standard American English in it, but it's either drawn out or cut short, or it's pronounced in a different part of your mouth.
Is it further to the back or closer to the front?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question that I've been thinking about is like, when do you know it is accent, and when do you know it is you not pronouncing it correctly? What is the limit there?
Well, that's a tricky question because technically accent doesn't matter. Accent is a class marker. It tells you, in addition to where you're from, it also tells a lot about your socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
And to apply, you know, to say that, like, what is the range of an acceptable what is the range of how do you say that? What is the range
of acceptable pronunciation?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It kind of applies that there is a standard there. Like the acceptable, like, you know, you sort of compare this accent to a something, and then that's something, you know, this comparison will allow you to determine if your accent is like, if your vowel is like, you know, if it's like acceptable or you actually pronounce it wrong. Which, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know that might be a difficult line to find because technically, as long as you can make yourself understood, then you've accomplished what you set out to do, which is to communicate.
Yeah.
So if another person understands you, even if it might take them a little bit longer to recognize your unusual vowel pattern, well then you still accomplished what you were trying to do.
Actually, Kimmy, in her work, she has to sometimes like you have to get on the call with people from different part of the world, right? If I understand correctly. What's your take on that? Like when what do you think about accent in terms of its importance in communication or in the business setting? What do you think about? What's your experience with that?
I'm not sure accent is important or not, but sometimes when I had a meeting with the other colleague, because they come from the other world, maybe India or Singapore or Malaysia, but sometimes I cannot understand what I say.
Right.
Accent, I cannot easy to catch the meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure it is important or not, but I try to understand them. Yeah.
Like, I think with that, because it is an accent, it's a slightly different sort of accent. Like, the Southern accent, it was created over many hundreds of years through slow evolution, and it also hasn't stayed the same. I mean, it continually evolves over time. Like when you're speaking to somebody who their first language is Malaysian or their first language is Indonesian or first language is, you know, whatever the case may be, they are bringing their pronunciation patterns from their native language into the second language. Which, I mean, like if I speak Chinese, you would be able to tell, like, oh, American accented Chinese, right? Because I'm bringing my own.
Yeah, like me.
like
listen to me. This is what you get. Like American accent mixed with some Chinese.
But that's because I'm bringing the muscle memory that I have already adapted for use as an English speaker into this other thing. So in a sense, you create a new accent every time somebody who, whatever their first language is, they learn English.
Yeah.
If, you know, that's a new accent, if they're the first person, or, you know, whatever, their community has their own unique English accent.
And then a lot of times, these accents are kind of the standard in those communities.
Right.
You know, like, people understand it, people are expecting that, so.
And, you know, like, I feel like the accent that a lot of people complain about, like, that it being difficult to understand, is like Indian accented English, which personally I don't have any trouble understanding Indian accented English because I recognize their like the pattern of their errors, right? Like the errors in their pronunciation, there is a pattern to it.
Yeah.
And so I can, in my own mind, like, okay, you said water, but I know you mean water. Because Indian speakers of English will often switch V and W, which Is it incorrect? Yes, but it doesn't really matter because they make the same error consistently in the same way all the time. So I can just correct that in my own mind.
Right.
So some people don't want to do that. Like, and I think
I think some people also find it hard to, because like,
yeah,
you know, I always tell my students that there are two ways that you could do, at least for me, there are two. One is through, you know, you just listen, you know, to an excessive amount of videos or audios about that, and then you just sort of, you know, you look at the subtitles, and then you just sort of like retrain your brain to be like, okay, I see this word, but I hear this sound, so that's how it goes, right? And then once you have enough input, your brain is going to just sort of come up with the rules. That's just how we do it. Like, that's just, you know, how the brain works. But there's also another way, which is like, you can, you know, we can like transcribe those rules. Like, for example, the W is going to become V, or L is going to become another sound, you know. But then these are, I find that these are usually what are lacking. Like, I can't, you know, like these rules are usually kind of like, you can find some people like saying like, oh yeah, like this vowel is gonna become this and this, you know, but it's never like a complete.
Yeah, it's never consistent. Never completely
consistent list. So that's really a tricky part about learning / teaching an accent.
That's why I don't, like, personally, I don't teach accents.
Yeah.
Like, if I ever get a student who comes to my class and they want to talk about, like, teacher, I'm wondering if you can help me with I want to sound like I want to have an American accent. Like, my very first thing is like, okay, I got to talk them out of this because this is not going to work. I can't teach you an American accent. I mean, I can, but it would take probably many months, potentially years. It would be extremely expensive. It would require multiple classes a week.
Yeah.
Probably with more than one tutor. And in the end, you've acquired a skill that isn't super useful. Like,
no, I was gonna say something. Sorry. I just, yeah. I was gonna comment. I want to comment on that, which is like, I have students who came to me and say, you know, I guess because you're speaking an American accent, a standard American accent, and I've gotten used to listen to your accent, that so much so that now, like, I have to listen to South African accent, and then I'm just very confused because it's, you know, or like listen to Australian accent, which is like not what I'm used to, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's, you know, so that's, I guess that's also I think that's an interesting observation that I got.
It could, I mean, I know, I guess for a long time, I just always assumed that every language had an accent, but that may be something that's, I mean, not unique to English, but that might be a unique feature of English, like the need to, you can't really learn the vowels. I mean, you can, but what you're doing is you're learning one particular region's preferred pronunciation pattern.
I also think that might be a common feature of human beings. Like, we, you know, because like I said, accent is never something, it's never just accent, you know, like, it's about, do you sound like us?
Yeah.
And do you sound like them? You know?
And accent's always paired up with a local slang dialect or a local lingo or something that's like Boston. Here's an example. But they mention in the video that the Boston accent is disappearing. Like, the South Boston accent, park your car. Park your car.
That's Boston accent.
Okay. But that accent is disappearing. And it's not just because of people moving around. It's also because, we didn't mention this, but you, earlier in the class, like, we were talking about accents disappearing, but another thing that contributed to that is the fact that we now all consume the same media. We all listen to the same radio shows, the same music, we watch the same movies, the same TV shows.
TikTok, Instagram,
yeah.
you know.
So a lot of, like, regional dialects are either disappearing or they're becoming flatter, not for any particular reason. It's just that we sound more like the people we listen to.
Yeah, and sometimes especially if you if we follow certain influencer or a certain movie star or pop star, we want to sound like them.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do it for the accent itself, but some other times, most of the time, people do it for because I want to sound like this
and that
person.
that was a side point, and I forgot the main point. Oh, we were talking about Boston. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a way that you can say that something is really cool in a Boston dialect, but you don't use that elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the expression is wicked pissa. That's wicked pissa.
Like, that's wicked. Like, that's sick.
Yeah. Wicked.
What is pissa then?
I don't know where that comes from, but it's Pisser. Like someone who, it's kind of crass. You know what I mean?
Pissa.
But it means that's awesome. Like, wicked pissa. But that's also kind of old fashioned. That local expression is disappearing just as, dialects are flattening, accents are flattening.
Right.
So, yeah.
Kimmy, do you have another question?
I just confuse what accent is native. Should I learn? Because English is not my native language, so we want to learn. So we want to learn how to speak native. So I saw the video that confused me is how should I learn?
What is native? What is a native accent? What is a native English?
Well, there you're getting into, ultimately that all boils down to a class argument, like who gets to be native and who doesn't get to be native, which, it becomes, at a certain point you end up just splitting hairs, I don't know.
Do you want to explain like what class here
like
is?
Class in the sense of, I don't know, like people will use accents to determine whether or not someone is worth their time. Like, is it worth me talking to you a little bit?
Yeah.
But you're making a snap judgment based on like what can you extract from that person, I guess, or like how useful is that person to you. But you're making a snap judgment based on a stereotypical understanding of what a person who speaks like that, where they're from, what they value, how they think, what they believe, which is not true. It's not accurate. It doesn't work that way, but people still do it anyway.
Yeah.
To answer your question of should you learn an accent, I can give you an emphatic no. It's a complete waste of your time. Don't worry about it. And I also notice a lot of tutors, sometimes I get the feeling that they are intentionally making someone self-conscious about their accent so that they'll keep taking classes.
Like, they'll make you feel like, you'll never pronounce things this way, it's this way.
Yeah.
Like this, like, not this, but this. I mean, like, when it comes to certain parts of learning, of English learning, that is required. Like, that is important, but never accent. Like, never pronounce this way if you want to sound American, or if you want to sound British, or if you want to sound Australian. Like,
there's a lot of people in the world who want to learn English, and so some people who, sure, they can speak the language, but I'm sure you're aware of this, like, just because you can speak a language doesn't mean you're qualified to teach it. So you get a lot of English teachers in quotation marks, who I would say are not really qualified to teach, and what they do is they use accents as a way of being like, my specialty is I can teach you a blah 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 accent, which just so happens to be the way that they speak, so that they don't actually have to put out a lot of effort into designing a course that's really useful for you. That's just kind of my take on that. Like, that's my hot take. I'm always suspicious of a teacher who's like, oh, I can make sure that you speak with like a perfect American accent. Like, what is that? What is a perfect American accent?
Perfect American accent? But also, I think that like, if you, okay, I'm trying to not get into this like you learn this accent because you're gonna use it, right?
Yeah.
Or like you want, what is it called? Utilitarianism.
Yeah.
Like if you're interested in the accent, or if you feel like you're gonna be exposed to the accent regularly, or if you're interested and you like it, or whatever reason, then learn it.
Yeah.
Because you never know. Because you never know when the accent is gonna come in handy.
Or like, if you're going to be interacting mostly with British people, maybe focus on a British style pronunciation.
Yeah.
If you're going to be interacting with Americans, focus on American accented. Like something that's sort of broadly, generally American, maybe not a specific region or anything. But like, there's a difference between American and British pronunciation.
Yeah.
But there's also differences within British pronunciation.
Yeah. So like, if you go to YouTube and search like American accent, just trust what is the majority of the accent that you found on the internet.
Yeah.
Because that's usually that usually tells you that this accent is more common. Yeah. I also have a lot of thoughts about that, because that's sort of just, you let the population that decides what kind of accent is the mainstream. I don't know, because that's kind of the whole thing with learning any language, right? Like, we're learning English because a lot of people speak English, so that's why we're learning it. People are learning Chinese because there are a lot of people learning there, so they're learning it. So ultimately, the truth is that most people are not gonna learn a language unless it is useful.
True.
Most people are not gonna learn an accent unless it's useful for them.
Yeah.
So I think just with that mentality, but also just remember, like,
unless they've been convinced that they need to learn it.
Yeah. Just remember, like, there is not a single accent that is better than the other one.
Right.
Or there is no language that is better than the other one. It's ultimately up to you if you're gonna use it or if you're not gonna use it. Yeah. And I think that's, I don't know.
A fitting little coda to this discussion.
Yeah.
Accents are interesting, but not particularly useful or a worthwhile thing to become worried about. Yeah. Well, we will let you go.
We'll let you go. But if you have any like feedbacks or comments, you can send a message to me, and then we'll
Sure.
Yeah, we'll see.
And assuming anyone sees this, we appreciate you all for watching.
Exactly. Thank you for joining our first
Clazz in the Woods.
First Clazz in the Woods.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.